a few weeks ago, I was interviewed by my friend Joel Sedekase over at the Think Institute, and the topic of the interview was science and God. And there were several points throughout that interview that I thought were worthy of being isolated and presented here over at the Catalyzing Faith page as sort of individual clips because they focused on very important topics that we need to address. And the clip that we will look at today in this video is focused on the general question of science and God, but more specifically, how science itself actually leads us to God.
So let's get into the meat of it here, Lucas.
All right.
What do you feel is the best, or what do you believe or think is the best scientific evidence for Christianity?
Well, I mean, the argument from science itself, I guess, is the best way to put it. I mean,
Okay.
we could talk about different arguments like the fine tuning of the universe and the Big Bang, whatever, Big Bang cosmology, origin of the universe, these sorts of things, and that's great. I think strict hard science that feeds into different premises and philosophical arguments, right? That's kind of how the science feeds into it in sort of an evidential sense, but taking it more a step back in a more meta sense, it's the philosophy of science and looking at what does science need to actually function. I Some people disagree, but I actually believe that when we do science, we are at least converging upon some sort of truth. That when we practice science and we say, hey, we discovered gravitational waves, we're not just saying, oh, we have this make believe thing that helps us do other science. We're actually saying there's a real phenomenon known as gravitational waves that we've detected. And in order for that to be the case, we need certain things to be true about the universe. The universe needs to be ordered. It needs to have a logical structure to it. But beyond that, we need to be creatures that have the capability to make observations and engage in a legitimate process of deliberation to reach conclusions. And neither of those things can you really get on any sort of worldview that doesn't include God.
Okay, yeah, flesh that out, man. Why not? Because that's the kind of argument that as a presuppositionalist I make all the time, and I know you're not coming from that same methodology, but what you're saying right now, I'm like, yes and amen. So flesh that out. Why do you say that, and why do you think that that's the case?
Well, I mean, I guess part of this comes down to if you believe if you believe things need explanations, right? If you take a look at the universe and you see that the universe is structured, it some might say it's a brute fact or something where it just doesn't have an explanation, but to me, I don't see that as a valid option. I think you have a thing that exists, this universe, and it exists in a certain way. And it's always relevant to ask, why is it the way it is? And without any sort of intentional agent, you can't explain the structure of the universe, or at least you can't explain why it's consistent, right? It just is. And with God, with an agent, you at least have something that can explain why the universe is structured. It has a structure because someone gave it structure.
Do you think? Why do you have a problem with the universe just being there as a brute fact? Do you think that we are designed to seek explanations for why things are the way they are? Do you think that there's something inherent in what it means to be human to do that kind of inquiry?
Yeah, I actually do. In in the talk that I give on truths and lies, the one of the things I add onto this is that human beings need to have an inquisitive nature. So in order to do science, you need to have an inquisitive nature, and part of being relational beings, I think, gives us that inquisitive nature. And Christian theology really cements that into who we are. We are relational, and that I believe gives us sort of a starting point for asking the types of questions. Okay, not just am I here, but why am I here? Does that make
No,
sense?
it does. The why question, though, is famously not one of those questions that can be answered by science, though. Or do you believe that it is?
I don't think, well, the why question can't be strictly answered by science, but science is sort of this applied philosophy. It's a narrowed scope. When we practice science, we are engaging in some sort of intellectual inquiry.
So the existence of science itself, you're saying, basically requires, how would you phrase it? God's existence, Christian truth, biblical truth claims. What if you were to boil all that down into it, you know, one or two phrases, which I know maybe I'm asking you to do the impossible here,
Sure.
but if someone were to say, Lucas, I've got 15 seconds on the elevator here. I'm getting off next floor. I'm about to go have a conversation with my atheist friend. Tell me again, what's that argument from science? How does the existence of science prove the existence of God? What do you
Right.
tell them?
So, in order for science to actually be an endeavor that gets us at truth, we need to have the universe has to be structured by a personal agent. And as human beings engaging in science, we need to be imaged after that personal agent. I hope you found that discussion both interesting and informative. But if you'd like to dig a little bit deeper, I want you to do a couple of things. First, I've included a link in the description to my full talk on the topic Truths and Lies about Science and Faith, where this sort of argument from science is defended in a little bit more depth. Second, I want you to click on the link to the full interview over at the Think Institute channel. And while you're there, be sure to subscribe to the Think Institute in addition to subscribing here at Catalyzing Faith.